The Crystal Cave by Mary Stewart, Book 3, The Wolf, 8. She had spoken so calmly that I saw the king's look of surprise. She put up a hand to push the hood back from her face, and met his eyes levelly. "Why not? I see no harm in it. I might have told you sooner, my lord, if you had asked me differently, and in a different place. There is no harm in men knowing. I am no longer in the world. I do not have to meet the eyes of the world or hear their tongues. And since I know now that my son too has retired from the world, then I know how little he will care what the world says about him. So I will tell you what you want to know, and when I tell you, you will see why I have never spoken of this before, not even to my own father or to my son himself." There was no sign of fear now. She was even smiling. She had not looked at me again. I tried to keep from staring at her, to school my face into blankness. I had no idea what she planned to say, but I knew that here would be no betrayal. She was playing some game of her own, and was secure in her own mind that this would avert whatever danger threatened me. I knew for certain that she would say nothing of Ambrosius, but still, everywhere in the hall was death. Outside it had begun to rain, and the afternoon was wearing on towards twilight. A servant came in at the door bearing torches, but Vortigern waved him back. To do him justice, I believe he was thinking of my mother's shame, but I thought to myself, there can be no help even there, no light, no fire. "Speak then," said Vortigern. "Who fathered your son?" "I never saw him," she spoke quite simply. "It was no man that I ever knew." She paused, then said without looking at me, her eyes still level on the king, "My son will forgive me for what he is soon to hear, but you have forced me, and this he will understand." Vortigern flashed me a look. I met it stonily, and I was certain of her now. She went on, "When I was only young, about 16, and thinking as girls do of love, it happened, one Martinmas Eve, after I and my women had gone to bed. The girl who slept in my room was asleep, and the others were in the outer chamber, but I could not sleep. After a while I rose from my bed and went to the window. It was a clear night with a moon. When I turned back to my bed place, I saw what I took to be a young man standing there, full in the middle of my bedchamber. He was handsome and young, dressed in a tunic and long mantle, with a short sword at his side. He wore rich jewels. My first thought was that he had broken in through the outer chamber while my women slept. My second was that I was in my shift and barefoot, with my hair loose. I thought he meant mischief, and was opening my mouth to call out and wake the women, when the youth smiled at me with a gesture, as if to tell me to be quiet. He meant me no harm. Then he stepped aside into the shadow, and when I stole after to look, there was no one there." She paused. No one spoke. I remembered how she would tell me stories when I was a child. The hall was quiet, but I felt the man beside me quiver, as he would have liked to move away. The queen's red mouth hung open, half in wonder, half, I thought, in envy. My mother looked at the wall above the king's head. I thought it had been a dream or a girl's fancy, bred of moonlight. I went to bed and told no one, but he came again, not always at night, not always when I was alone. So I realized it was no dream, but a familiar spirit who desired something from me. I prayed, but still he came, while I was sitting with my girls spinning, or when I walked on dry days in my father's orchard. I would feel his touch on my arm, and his voice in my ear, but at these times I did not see him, and nobody heard him but I. She groped for the cross at her breast and held it. The gesture looked so unfocused and natural that I was surprised until I saw that it was indeed natural, that she did not hold the cross for protection, but for forgiveness. I thought to myself, it is not the Christian God she should fear when she lies. She should be afraid of lying like this about the things of power. The king's eyes bent on her were fierce, and I thought, exultant. The priests were watching her, as if they would eat her spirit alive. So all through the winter he came to me, and he came at night. I was never alone in my chamber, but he came through doors and windows and walls and lay with me. I never saw him again, but heard his voice and felt his body. Then Then, in the summer, when I was heavy with child, he left me." She paused. "They will tell you how my father beat me and shut me up, and how when the child was born he would not give him a name fit for a Christian prince, but because he was born in September, named him for the sky god, the wanderer, who has no house but the woven air. I called him Merlin always, because on the day of his birth a wild falcon flew in through the window and perched above the bed, and looked at me with my lover's eyes. Her glance crossed mine, then a brief flash. This then was true, and the Emrys too. She had given me that in spite of them. She had kept that much of him for me after all. She had looked away. "I think, my lord king, that what I have told you will not altogether surprise you. You must have heard the rumors that my son was not as ordinary boys. It is not possible always to be silent, and I know there have been whispers, but now I have told you the truth, openly. And I pray you, my lord Vortigern, to let my son and me go back in peace to our respective houses of religion." When she had finished, there was silence. She bowed her head and pulled her hood again to hide her face. I watched the king and the men behind me. I thought to see him angry, frowning with impatience, but to my surprise his brows smoothed out, and he smiled. He opened his mouth to answer my mother, but the queen forestalled him. She leaned forward, licking her red lips, and spoke for the first time of the priests. "Morgan, is this possible?" It was the tall man, the bearded high priest, who answered her. He spoke without hesitation, bland and surprisingly empathetic. "Madam, it is possible. Who has not heard of these creatures of air and darkness, who batten on mortal men and women? In my studies and in many of the books I have read, I have found stories of children being born into the world in this fashion." He eyed me, fondling his beard, then turned to the king. "Indeed, my lord, we have the authority of the ancients themselves. They knew well that certain spirits, haunting the air at night between the moon and the earth, cohabit at their will with mortal women in the shape of men. It is certainly possible that this royal lady, this virtuous royal lady, was victim of such a creature. We know, and she has said herself, that this was rumored for many years. I myself spoke with one of her waiting women, who said that the child could surely be begotten of none but the devil, and that no man had been near her. And of the son himself, when he was a child, I heard many strange things. Indeed, King Vortigern, this lady's story is true." No one looked any longer at Ninian. Every eye in the place was on me. I could see in the king's face nothing that was not at once ferocious and innocent. A kind of eager satisfaction, like a child's, or a wild beast's when it sees its prey loitering nearer. Puzzled, I held my tongue and waited. If the priests believed my mother, and Vortigern believed the priests, then I could not see where danger could come from. No faintest hint had turned men's thoughts towards Ambrosius. Morgan and the king seemed to hurry with eager satisfaction down the path that my mother had opened for them. The king glanced at my guards. They had moved back from me, no doubt afraid to stand so near a demon's child. At his sign, they closed in again. The man on my right still held his sword drawn, but down by his side and out of my mother's view. It was not quite steady. The man on my left surreptitiously loosened his own blade in its sheath. Both men were breathing heavily, and I could smell fear on them. The priests were nodding sagely, and some of them, I noticed, held their hands in front of them in the sign to ward off enchantment. It seemed that they believed Morgan. They believed my mother. They saw me as the devil's child. All that had happened was that her story had confirmed their own belief, the old rumors. This, in fact, was what she had been brought here for, and now they watched me with satisfaction, but also with a kind of wary fear. My own fear was leaving me. I thought I began to see what they wanted. Vortigern's superstition was legendary. I remembered what Dinius had told me about the stronghold that kept falling down, and the reports of the king's soothsayers. that it was bewitched. It seemed possible that, because of the rumors of my birth, and possibly because of the childish powers I had shown before I left home, to which Morgan had referred, they thought I could advise or help them. If this was so, and they had brought me here because of my reputed powers, there might be some way in which I could help Ambrosius right from the enemy's camp. Perhaps, after all, the god had brought me here for this. Perhaps he was still driving me. Put yourself in his path. Well, one could only use what was to hand. If I had no power to use, I had knowledge. I cast my mind back to the day at King's Fort. Flooded mine in the core of the crag, to which the dream had led me. I cast my mind back to the day at King's Fort, and to the flooded mine in the core of the crag, to which the dream had led me. I would certainly be able to tell them why their foundations would not stand. It was an engineer's answer, not a magician's, but I thought, meeting the oyster eyes of Morgan, as he dry-washed those long, dirty hands before him, as if it was a magician's answer they wanted. If it was a magician's answer they wanted, they should have it, and Vortigern with them. I lifted my head. I believe I was smiling. King Vortigern! It was like dropping a stone into a pool. The room was so still, so centered on me. I said strongly, "My mother has told you what you asked her. No doubt you will tell me now in what way I can serve you. But first I must ask you to keep your royal promise and let her go." "The Lady Ninian is our honoured guest." The king's reply seemed automatic. He glanced at the open arcade that faced the river, where the white lances of the rain hissed down across a dark grey sky. "You are both free to go whenever you choose, but this is no time to begin the long journey back to Maridunum. You will surely wish to lie the night here, madam, and hope for a dry day tomorrow." He rose, and the queen with him. "Rooms have been prepared, and now the queen will take you there to rest and make ready to sup with us. Our court here and our rooms are poor, makeshift, but such as they are at your service. Tomorrow you will be escorted home. My mother's had stood when they did." "And my son? You still have not told us why you brought us here for this." "Your son can serve me. He has powers which I can use. Now, madam, if you will go with the queen, I will talk to your son and tell him what I want of him. Believe me, he is as free as you are. I constrained him only until you told me the truth I wished to hear. I must thank you now for confirming what I had guessed." He put out a hand. "I swear to you, Lady Ninian, by any god you like, that I do not hold his birth against him, now or ever." She regarded him for a moment, then bowed her head, and ignoring his gesture, came down to me, holding out both her hands. I crossed to her and took them in my own. They felt small and cold. I was taller than she was. She looked up at me with the eyes that I remembered. There was anxiety in them, and the dregs of anger, and some message urgently spoken in silence. "Merlin, I would not have had you know it this way. I would have spared you this." But this was not what her eyes were saying. I smiled down at her and said carefully, "Mother, you told me nothing today that shocked me. Indeed, there's nothing you could tell me about my birth that I do not already know. Set yourself at rest." She caught her breath, and her eyes widened, searching my face. I went on slowly. "Whoever my father was, it will not be held against me. You heard what the king promised. That is all we need to know. Whether she got to this part of the message, I could not guess. She was still taking in what I had said first." "You knew? You knew?" "I knew? Surely you don't imagine that in all the years I've been away from you, and with the kind of studies I've undertaken, I never found out what parentage I had? It's some years now since my father made himself known to me. I assure you I've spoken with him, not once but many times. I find nothing in my birth of which I need to be ashamed." For a moment longer she looked at me. Then she nodded, and the lids drooped over her eyes. A faint colour had come up into her face. She had understood me. She turned away, pulling her hood up again to hide her face, and put her hand on the king's arm. She went from the room, walking between him and the queen, and her 2 women followed them. The priests remained, clucking and whispering and staring. I took no notice of them, but watched my mother go. The king paused in the doorway, and I heard his voice bidding my mother goodbye. There was a crowd waiting in the outer porch. They made way for Rowena and my mother, and the half-dozen women who were there followed them. I heard the swish of their dresses and the light voices of the women fade into the sound of the rain. Vortigern stood still in the doorway, watching them go. Outside the rain fell with a noise like a running river. It was darkening fast. The king swung round on his heel and came back into the hall with his fighting men behind him. And that's the end of chapter 8.